Hello and welcome back to Biology for Beginners. As always, I'm your host, Morgan. This week, we're continuing our march through Chapter 5 and talking a little bit about the basics of energy and the cell. Some of the things we're going to talk about here we'll expand upon in the next couple of chapters, so sit tight if it seems a little vague right now. As always, we're taking this moment here to pause and flash up those terms and definition slides so that you can either pause the video and grab the vocabulary you need to understand the words coming out of my mouth today, or you can pop on over to my Patreon. The link is down in the description below for you, and grab a PDF of my slides, terms and definitions included, for absolutely free. A reminder that if you do like what I'm doing here on the channel and you want to support the work here, if you sign up, you will have access to Bio for Beginners and my slides a day early. We're also working on getting other videos up a day early for patrons and some other things that I have in the works, but I'm adjusting to a new entirely online quarter that just started at school, and my partner who helps me out with stuff is adjusting to a new promotion at a new job location. So in the works, hopefully by the end of the month that will be ironed out a bit, and I have a for realsy schedule so I can stay on track. But without further ado, let's get into this. What is energy? So basically the answer to that is energy is just the capacity to cause change, and especially some sort of work. So some big categories of energy is going to be kinetic energy, which is the energy of motion. So making things move, that's going to be kinetic energy. Thermal energy is a kind of kinetic energy that's associated with some random movement of atoms and molecules. And the transfer of this can be measured, and that is called heat. So a little thing here, when you see like that hot cup of coffee, you can feel the steam and the warmth coming off of it. That is heat. That is the thermal energy transferring from that warm liquid and dissipating into the cooler air. This is measured by seeing the temperature in that thermometer. And then kinetic energy just refers to the energy of motion in general. Energy is the capacity to cause change. So my coffee has the capacity to change me from a very sleepy, useless person to a slightly less sleepy person that has realized I have things that need to be done. The other kind of energy that we need to talk about is potential energy. Now, potential energy is a little bit of a harder concept to grasp, especially if you're not already pretty familiar with the chemistry and physics concepts that really talk about potential energy. I know that potential energy was a very difficult thing for my little bio-focused brain to grasp when I took physics and chemistry, but it's basically energy that is possessed as a result of location. So potential energy is energy that a thing has because of where it is. It's not energy that's being used yet. It's energy that's kind of being hoarded. So in the image here, you see a bike at the top of a hill that's some distance X high. The bike is not going down the hill yet, but it has a potential energy. It has this potential to release kinetic energy when it zooms down the hill, but it's not in motion yet. It's just hoarding that energy because it's X distance above that lower portion of ground. So chemical energy is the potential energy in chemical bonds. So in this water molecule we have here, those little gray bonds have a certain amount of chemical energy sealed up inside of them. This energy is not released, but it's being hoarded by that molecule. And next to it, I've included an ATP molecule because ATP is basically the cellular energy that powers everything. It's not really important that you know what ATP looks like, but I thought I'd throw it in anyway. And the very important bonds here is the bond that's holding that last phosphate group onto it. So that is the most important bond that holds the energy for the work that the cell will do. So any good discussion of energy is going to lead to a discussion of thermodynamics. And thermodynamics is basically the study of energy transformation. The very important things that we need to understand about it, we're not going to go super in depth into thermodynamics. I am not a physics class, but we do need to understand the basics of this first and second law. So the first law is basically the conservation of energy. It just says that energy cannot be created or destroyed. So basically, energy can be transformed, but you cannot just make energy. So it has to come from somewhere and be transformed into something else. Energy moves around and is transformed. And then the second law is every energy conversion increases this thing called entropy. Entropy is the measure of disorder. So the higher the entropy, the more disorderly the thing is. So in these very large systems, so a system is just kind of the thing being looked at. You're going to see as energy is transformed and converted, the disorder increases a little bit. So as the heat comes off of that cup of coffee, as the thermal energy and the air molecules around it move a little bit faster, everything's a little bit more disorderly than it was before. So the unique thing is that cells and these very small systems are so orderly. So the second law, it's important to keep in mind that there are situations in which it appears the second law is broken, but we don't need to get much more in depth than that. So cells are orderly, but the important thing here is if we look at this image from the textbook, it's kind of comparing energy conversion in a car to energy conversion in a cell. So if energy is conserved, why can't a cell just have this little nugget of energy and continuously use the same thing? Why would they need to eat and get their energy from other sources? Well, like the car with the combustion energy, the combustion is the system that's going to transform that energy in gasoline into the waste products of carbon dioxide and water. It loses energy as heat. The cell does the exact same thing, except instead of gasoline and oxygen, the cell is using glucose and oxygen through a process called cellular respiration instead of combustion. So again, this car has this combustion that transforms the chemical energy in the gasoline and oxygen into the kinetic movement of the car, and loses some energy as heat into those and ends up with those waste products of carbon dioxide and water. The cell uses glucose and oxygen to transform the energy for cellular work with ATP through cellular respiration. It will lose some energy as heat and also produce carbon dioxide and water. And so if we just zoom in on the cell part here, cellular respiration is, again, the energy conversion within a cell. So I'd like to mention here that plants do use photosynthesis to capture the solar energy. We will talk about photosynthesis in a later chapter. Cellular respiration is the big thing that we're focusing on right here, because that is the process by which cells have the energy conversion they need to do the cell things. And we will talk about cellular respiration in the next chapter in detail. Again, today is just the basics of how cells and energy do the cell and energy thing. Cellular respiration requires chemical reactions to work. So let's talk a little bit about those chemical reactions. So the chemical reactions we're going to focus on are exergonic and endergonic chemical reactions, which I know are big, scary words, but let's break it down a little bit. Exergonic reactions are chemical reactions that produce energy and release energy. So you have these reactants with a fairly high potential energy when you compare them to their products. So if you look at this chart here, there is a certain amount of energy released. Exergonic, energy out. Where if you look over here at the endergonic reactions, you have energy going in to make the reaction happen. The products have a higher potential energy than those reactants. So there was a certain amount of energy required to be put in to make the reaction go forward. So endergonic, energy in. Exergonic, energy out. And so if you total all of these interactions happening within an organism, you get the metabolism. And certain metabolic pathways are what break down or build up the complex molecules. So you can break down some food molecule into its simpler components or some storage molecule into its simpler components to be used within the cells and then built back up into another complex molecule to either store more stuff or be used somewhere else. But the thing that allows those metabolic pathways and the cellular respiration to work is a thing called energy coupling. So basically you use an exergonic reaction hand in hand with an endergonic reaction so that the energy released by the one reaction is then shoved into the other reaction to make that one move forward. So energy coupling using the exergonic energy out to then push into the endergonic reaction that requires the energy to be put into it. So for all of these chemical reactions, ATP or adenosine triphosphate is the key. Adenosine triphosphate is a big, scary word, but generally from here on out, you're just going to hear it as ATP. Adenosine is just a molecule. Triphosphate just means it has 3 phosphate groups tacked onto it. Adenosine, 3 phosphate groups. So if you kind of look at this little chart here, it's kind of circular because the cell is continuously making and using ATP. So you'll see that the ATP synthesis requires an energy input so that the ATP can then carry that energy in its chemical bonds. So it can be pushed through a hydrolysis reaction to produce ADP, so adenosine diphosphate, and a free phosphate group. And so that energy is used for cellular work. Then energy will come in to move that ADP and a phosphate group back into ATP during ATP synthesis. And so here you can see at this first image here is just kind of a more linear look at how ATP gets transformed into ADP, a phosphate group, and energy. And you'll also see the different ways in which the energy from ATP is used. So for that chemical work, for transport work, when you need those active transport areas that we talked about in the last video when we talked about membranes. And then of course mechanical work for moving things around cells, moving cells to different places, for our muscles to move. So again, hydrolysis will remove a phosphate group from ATP. That is an exergonic reaction, so it releases energy. And then phosphorylation takes that phosphate group from the ATP and transfers it to another molecule, which is an endergonic reaction, so the energy in, to then make a thing happen. And that is energy coupling. That hydrolysis and phosphorylation makes the cells do the things and makes the energy be transferred around so that cellular work can happen. And again, we will get more in depth into cellular respiration when we get into chapter 6. So that should be, I want to say, in the next couple of weeks. I think we'll have one more chapter 5 video, but I'm not looking at my calendar right now, so don't hold me to that. But if I'm not mistaken, there'll be one more chapter 5 video, then we'll get into the mystery of cellular respiration. But for now, I'm sure I've all horrified you a little bit with my probably confusing explanation of energy, which is more of a physics concept, but is still important to understand on a biological scale. So I hope that you go take a moment to decompress, have a cup of coffee, contemplate the thermal energy that you can feel radiating off of it, and have a wonderful rest of your day, evening. Actually, if it's evening, maybe don't have a cup of coffee. But you know what, you do you. I'm not gonna judge. And have a wonderful rest of whatever time period you happen to be in. I will see you all in the next one. Thank you again for watching this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and ring that bell if you would like to see more. And if you'd like to follow me on any of my other social medias, the links are down in the description below. Don't forget to check out thereptilegoth.com for all of my articles and blog posts. If you found any value in this video and you would like to help support the channel, please check out my Patreon page. That link is also in the description down below. And a special thanks goes out to my Diamond Dragon patron, Diane B. What you're doing is really helping me fund a dream here. I will see you guys all in the next one.